My name is Cassie Summers. Welcome to the Curious Universe podcast. Welcome everyone to the show. This week we have a very different show. I'm so excited and so grateful to be here with you. Powerful, beautiful, amazing ladies. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us.
So excited to be here.
Christel and Marnie are creating something like, I want to say like brand new. Like it just feels like it's like a new possibility for this world. Whew. And it's kind of coming in two things. So you have a podcast coming out and you have a class coming out, and it is based around the topic of cults.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
I actually love the title. The cult conversations for the podcast is freaking brilliant. And then the class is the cult class, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So with all that said, everyone has the information. I wanted to leap in and just actually talk about your inspiration. I know you each have personal stories and we can share those. But also what inspired you to like create this class, this podcast, this movement, this possibility?
Yeah, I can speak for myself, and then Marnie, I want to hear it for you. Like Marnie kind of started, well, there's a lot of different factors. One of the factors is that Marnie started to talk about guilty of heresy. And we met, she and I, back in Bible school, like over 20 years ago now, and we have an episode. Well, you can go actually to her YouTube and listen to that conversation,
and we'll link it.
Yeah, but we met when we were both very Christian and studying, and then had our own paths and sort of found access consciousness in different ways. She found it first, and then I found it via her. And now 10, 12 years later are creating our lives in really different ways, have lost our religion and are, creating our life and have a different sense of things. So when she invited me onto her show to talk about that. And that was probably one of the beginning things. Simultaneous to that, there was just a big energy occurring out in kind of the access world with somebody leaving and this big fuss being made about, is access a cult? And I was writing about it, and, so it was just kind of up. It was a convergence of things. I was raised in a cult. I actually know a lot about it. I know what it is and what it isn't. And I also am a facilitator of consciousness. So it was like, there's no real voice out there really actively talking about this. Why not?
Yeah. Wow. Why not?
Yes.
I'll take that on.
Yeah, bring it.
Marnie, yes. I'd love to hear from you.
Totally what Christel said. And to go to heresy and what that is it's an opinion profoundly at odds with what is considered the norm. And so part of what occurred, as Christel was talking about with this cult conversation that's occurring, specifically about access, was looking at it and going, this conversation is actually really boring. Is it a cult or is it not a cult? Is that all we're going to talk about? So how about let's really jump in and go beyond the black and white, and let's have an exploration of what is a cult and what are the elements of a cult, and what's the difference between a cult and people who treat things like a cult, but it's not actually a cult. And there's so many levels to it. And so we just said, let's just talk and have a different conversation.
Yeah, I think there's so much out around a lot of different topics. I mean, the cult of #MeToo, we could look at a lot of different things that kind of people, trends, things that people, where they jump on the bandwagon that occur. And this is one of those things that typically bandwagons. It's like you're either in this camp where this is a cult and oh my God, or you're in this camp where it isn't. And that's what I was seeing was a lot of sort of people being introduced to this thing inside themselves where they were either going to doubt and be afraid and go into a lot of thinking, or they were going to know. And so I was really grateful that this whole kind of thing came up at the time that it did, because it showed me, one, what was different about me, and also showed me like what I want to be the source of more in the world. It's like, if I don't know if there's enough voices out there really talking about like, how do you know what you know about something? No matter what it is, whether it's the worst things that you could possibly imagine, murder, sexual abuse, rape, all these cults, religious abuse, no matter what it is, how do you know what you know when the narrative or the popular story out in the world is one thing? And maybe what was true for you is a different thing. And then how do you know it? And then how do you choose to be it for yourself and maybe for other people too? I think there's a more interesting conversation to be had. And that's what we really wanted to voice.
And how much do we look for validation somewhere out there? So instead of, as Christel said, being able to know what you know, what if what you know doesn't match what anybody around you is saying? What if you don't see it any place in the world? Can you still know it? And you really have to go back to look at our whole culture. And from the beginning, families, Sarah Grandinetti has been saying that parenting is basically gaslighting. Mainstream parenting is basically gaslighting. And I went, I cannot argue that. It's kind of, you are talked out of what you know from the get. And then you go to school. And then if you are in a church of any kind, just go down the line. We are taught to follow what someone else says. We're taught to fall in line, to look for that validation. And there's nowhere in it for most of us that we are encouraged to know what we know. So there was a study that was done, and they took, I think it was like 6 guys, and 5 of them were informed what was going to happen in this little test environment. 1 was not. And what they were informed was, you're going to go and sit in this room, and on the projector on the wall, we're going to put up this thing that has 4 lines. When you are asked, how many lines do you see? You are to say 3. So 6th guy, who's the 4th one in the room to get asked the question, the answers are 3, 3, 3. And you see him look. He looks around and he looks at the screen and he hesitates and he says 3. But how much of that is exactly what occurs in all areas of life? We know it, but nobody's saying it, so we don't dare say it either.
Woo! Yeah. And okay, let's bring this into the cult world for a minute, because I would say in some respects, whether it's the cult of family or the cult of religion or what, that feels amplified. Because not only do you not want to be the one crazy person in the room, obviously, but now it's like, what are our presumptive realities of what's going to happen? What would happen if I would have said, well, I see 4? What's going to happen if I don't align and agree with what's going on here? And
and how much does that hit our very strong drive to belong? And so, and we can break down, because Christel and I talked about this earlier today, of what is an actual cult and what is not, and what are the differences.
I was hoping to talk about that. Yeah.
But when people go to what I would call an actual cult, how much of that is they find something, they look around at the world and they go, wow, I feel really different. There's got to be more to this life. I don't see it here. And there's something that just doesn't fit for me here. And then they hear something that somehow strikes a chord. It somehow resonates. It might seem crazy to the rest of the world, but for them, it makes sense as close as they can find to how they fundamentally feel about life and about things. And then so they start becoming a part of what's going on, and they get happier. And now they have a sense of belonging. And that drive and that connection and that I belong here is so strong. If you say there's 4 lines and there's 3, what does that mean for your connection to this group?
Yeah. And I mean, I would say a cult is anything that requires you to give up what you fundamentally believe or know in favor of what they fundamentally believe or know. So, I mean, again, you can really put so many different things in that category: family, religion, school, different kinds of churches. When I was growing up, my cult was defined a little differently, in that basically Christianity was the primary religion and anything that wasn't Christianity was a cult. So that's how I talk about it. But as I've gotten older and I've really looked at it, I'm like, well, one, cult is very much broader than that. And two, you can treat something like a cult that's not a cult. You can be very cultish with it. What, like, I hear people talk about, I've even said myself, like, I'm in Access. You can't be in Access. You can't join Access. There's nothing to sign. You can get certified by it in order to facilitate other people with it. You can take classes and you can change your life with it, but you can leave at any time. And even if the people factor gets weird, because people get weird, it doesn't mean that's not an indicator that the organization itself is a cult. I've been to more Christian churches that are cults than any other thing ever. And so anyway, so it's like, what is it and how do you treat it are two different conversations. And you really to get clarity, you have to look at what you're doing or what the people around you are doing. I think it's really funny that some of the loudest voices about Access being a cult are in fact doing cult, because cult does followers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And telling anyone what is true versus empowering them by question is cult-like.
Yeah. There's a difference between stating what is and telling someone what's true. So, and this is where we as individuals, if we don't empower ourselves with the knowledge of how we know what's true and what's not true, we're always going to be fearing and doubting when we hear information. And so to me, that's the more relevant conversation, is okay, so that's what they're saying and that's what they're saying. I mean, I saw this a lot when COVID happened. Everyone went into this panic, but I was okay, and a lot of the people I knew were okay, because we were navigating the havoc with awareness. And so cult is another area of havoc where you've just got all of this sensationalism and this significance and, people pulling other people on side in order to be right, which is how you have to do it in order to be right. And not a lot of people going, well, what's true for me? Or the people that are doing that, not saying a whole lot about it. So it's not very visible. So what tends to be visible around these topics are the people that are making it significant, pulling people on side, that kind of thing. And what tends to be not very visible is the people kind of silently walking away going, well, that's true for you. I'm going to go this way. So we were like, well, what if as two people doing that, we actually started talking?
Exactly. And as you said earlier, Christel, seeing the gift in it, because no matter who's saying what, if you're not looking for the right answer, and if you're not going into fear and doubt of yourself, what it does is opens up a space and invites you to explore even deeper what is true for me.
Yeah.
What still works for me? What doesn't work for me? What would I like to choose here? And it has nothing to do with anybody else, what's being said, what's not being said. But so can we take this external conversation of trying to label it black and white, right and wrong, and go, actually, what's the gift for me internally to clarify what's true for me? And then to be able to say, there's 4 lines, if there's 4 lines.
And I really think it takes a big expansion of self, or I want to say it takes a big person, but I think it's not totally correct, because we are these big beings. So are we going to choose to include and then choose what works for us? Or are we going to choose to exclude ourselves and what might really work for us in favor of this really loud popular thing? I've been around access consciousness and facilitating this for 10 years. There's so many different situations that show up when you're around something for a long time. You're in a family for a long time. And the requirement every single time where it's been really intense about something has been for me to go away and look at, well, what's true for me here? If I choose this pathway, what's that going to create for me? And that's the only thing that I've been able to depend on, because everything else around me has changed, right? Like the people landscape is always going to change. The opinions of people have always changed. So am I going to be swept away by that and allow my future to be changed by other people? Or am I going to navigate these waters with like, okay, what's really going to work for me here? What's true for me here, no matter what anybody else says?
I feel like what you're touching on right now is kind of like cult immunity in a sense, because I mean, both you ladies are right, correct. There's so many different people can treat anything cultish. And I love what you just said about access and the whole, like, even leaving access to me, it never made sense because I'm like, you're not leaving. Like, it's a set of tools and techniques. If I don't use my
classes,
yeah, it's classes. But if I stop going to classes or I stop using my hammer, I didn't leave my hammer. Like, I didn't get divorced.
You
like,
left the cult of tools.
I know. It's just like, I'm not doing that anymore. Some people love to go to the chiropractor and then they stop going. Does that mean they left the cult of chiropractics? Or but it's how do you treat it? How do you digest it with your brain? What have you decided about it and all of that? So if you had the point of view of like, oh, everything's interesting, what can I include, what can I receive, and what do I know, then would you have to live in this fear of like, is this a cult, is this not a cult, is this a cult, is this not a cult, you know?
Yeah, well, you only have to live there if you are basing your security as a person on what other people think. If that no longer matters anything to you, and which for me is the most secure position, right? Like where I don't care what you think about me. Like I'm going to live and I'm going to choose and be what works for me. Then, you know, so if depending on which one is more valuable to you is where you will be taken by the narrative. So if you care about what other people think, the narrative's always going to grab you because you'd be like, oh my God, I didn't know. And all of a sudden, you know, your entire creative source as a being is like washed away.
Wow.
Until your return, because well, that's the great thing though. Like, you know, like if you do that, then you have a new choice in every 10 seconds and you can return to you immediately, but it's recognizing what's happening, you know?
And it also leads people to jump from one thing to follow to the next, one thing to make the source to the next, because eventually what occurs when you're looking to someone else or something else and making that your source, something will disappoint you. Something will land incorrectly with you. Something will not work for you. And then now you have to decide, was I stupid to be a part of this? Are they wrong? Am I wrong? Or am I right? Are they right? Then you go into the whole fear, doubt, head trip, which then usually causes us to separate from the whatever. And then we go find the next thing. So it really fundamentally changing what Christel just said, to be able to choose it for yourself, no matter what anyone is saying. And going back to our culture and families and school, we have been entrained to do the opposite. So it truly is a muscle of just starting with, even if it's everybody's drinking a cup of coffee today, and I just join the group in the work office every morning and have a cup of coffee, just even going, well, what do I actually desire? And that sounds really simple. And do we really include ourselves, or do we look outside of us first?
Yeah. I mean, as you were talking about I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking, Marnie, as you were talking about, like when you look, you're in one and then you're disappointed or whatever, and then you look for the next one. That is relationship as we do it here. And I was looking at like, that's exactly what, I mean, I had a really rough last 2 years and it's changed so much over the last 2 months with these new clearings we're doing, because I had this need of a reactive reality. So everything in the relationship that didn't match what my picture was, although I didn't know I was doing this, it was so unconscious, would stimulate this need to react. And I went into doubt about my choice for this relationship. So I was constantly leaving in my head and packing in my head. I'm like, I'm going back to the United States. But it's the same thing we do with anything else. And so what had to change was the clearing out of all the need to react. And so what I've gotten access to is like, what is this for me? Is this and it is. That's why I'm here. So it's cool because you are kind of carried along by what you know underneath it all. But if you're like way up here with the need to react to stuff, which is that reacting to the sensationalism and the significance and then you will always be swept away by what other people are telling you. You won't even be able to identify what's true and what's a lie here until you get really present and you're out of reaction and you can really look at it for yourself.
I love the question you just said, Christel. You know, what is true for me, and is this nurturing to me? That question right there would really just remove a lot of the bullshit to the clarity of, is this a contribution? Is this nurturing to me? And if the answer is yes, no matter what it is, you would not choose that for what reason?
I guess if somebody else didn't like it.
Yeah. That's fun.
Can we explore for a minute? Because that's so brilliant. And then I'm almost like tapping into the listeners, and there's that almost panic that, because even I love the video that we're going to link in here. And Christel, you even talked about like, that was one of the gifts of the cult. And I was like, wow, that's awesome.
But I could talk about the gifts of sexual abuse. I could talk about the gifts of, there's gifts. Yeah. So yes.
So people can go nurturing, but there could be aspects, like even a relationship that's really abusive. I had an 11-year relationship, and there was some aspects that it felt kind of nurturing, like it could kind of, so then now people are, because our trust in ourselves has been completely like not nurtured. We have these people going, but I can't even trust myself to know. Where can they start? Like, I want like some really like starting tools. Like they're just here and they're like, I don't even know. Part of this feels abusive. Part of this feels really good.
Well,
I'm going to quote Christel. I'm going to quote Christel because we talked about this, because someone was saying this to her. If I can't trust myself, I don't know. And she said, stand up. Yes, you do know. Stop saying you don't know. Yes, you do know. And that might not sound like a tool, but there is stop like buying. Yeah, it was wonderful. I was like, yes, it is that though. Because sometimes we need that. Stop it. Yes, you do. Who told you? You don't know. You do.
Yeah. That's definitely one side of it. I mean, there's a few different ways you can look at it. Because on one hand, it's like, I get it. If you're brand new to this conversation, it's like, oh my God, where do I even start? Because me too. Like when I started with all of this knowing stuff, I was a mess. I had been brainwashed and gaslit and abused my whole life. And then I'd done it to myself the rest of my life. And so by the time I found these conversations and these tools, I was a walking, talking reaction. I was thinking all the time, feeling all the time. There's no trust myself. What does that even mean? So I get it. What we have to really know is that when you do know and you can trust you now, where can you start?
Yeah.
So don't believe me, because that would be the cult of Christel. It would be like, what one tool could you start to use to begin to kind of uncover you? And whether it's like, there's a few, and if you guys need just a stack of basics that are really short, you can go to infinitebeingschool.com, because I recorded some really beautiful 3-minute videos on all these basic tools. You know, you can start with like, okay, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Because what's happening when you come into a conversation like this is you've had so much input from other people and you've believed so much of it and you've given away so much of yourself that you can't tell the difference between what's true and what's not true. And that's real in the sense of like, we've really abused ourselves.
Yeah.
So you start somewhere and you start with like every thought, every feeling, every emotion, go, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Again, I have a video on it. And you just start, because what you do, if you do that for 3 days, is you'll get more access to you that you probably have never even felt before. I remember when I first started with all of this, I'd never had access to me. If I did, I don't remember. Do you guys remember this? Like in the beginnings?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
I'm like, oh, I thought all the time, but apparently I don't. Like there's, you don't know what you don't know. So it uncovers what you don't know. And that turns out to be you. Or you can ask every thought, every feeling, every emotion, like, who do you belong to? Are you mine? Because have you ever asked your thoughts a question? Have you ever asked, when you're listening to a bunch of other people and their opinion, Have you questioned that, or did you go instantly into doubt and thinking? So what if you gave it a question instead? Like, are you mine? Is this my point of view about this? Or is this someone else's? Really got curious about it. That curiosity is going to start to break apart where you've just given yourself away in favor of everybody else's opinion and give you more access to you. So to me, those are two really key, very beginning but advanced starting points.
Yeah.
Marnie,
And I would,
Yeah.
well, I would just add to what you said, the willingness to be interesting point of view and stay an interesting point of view, not having to immediately replace it with another point of view. So it's like,
but if you do, there's
how
a tool.
much there is a tool for that. Yes. But it's kind of, for me, it's like the interesting point of view is being on the trapeze that's swinging,
Yeah.
and you're going to let go of that one, but there's a space in the air where you're not even sure where you're going to land. You're just kind of in that middle space. And it can feel like that because you're going, wow, everything I've built my whole life on, I'm considering, and nobody's telling you have to let go of anything. I'm considering just saying, okay, maybe it's just interesting. Maybe it's not true. And that can feel like being in the middle of the air. And no idea where you're going to land. And I would say another piece for me, and anybody who's come from extreme gaslighting, abuse, whatever, we do this physical checkout. I can look back on my life and from this perspective, see how I was so not even in it for years. And I know that can sound strange, but I was so checked out, so on autopilot, so didn't ask any questions, so didn't consider myself in anything, that to really begin to get to the place of being able to choose for me was a choice to, wow, I have decided being present here is scary and dangerous, and staying checked out is my safety net and my safe place. And if I'm going to actually be in this life and have my own awareness and knowing, presence is required. So how can I choose that? And a pragmatic for me was just simply even getting in the shower and just being with the water instead of going through the, I got to take a shower, wash the hair. Like, no, like, all right, water on my hand. And it might seem strange, but it's the connecting with this body, this physical reality. I am here. And what if it is actually okay for me to be here?
Yeah.
And as that became more and more a reality for me, there was more and more the awareness and the ability to actually consider myself in my life. And another really, really big one for me was giving myself permission to get it so, quote, wrong. Mm-hmm. Instead of having to sort it out first and get the right answer first and make the right choice first and determine what it was so I didn't mess it up, I went, you know what? I'm going to allow myself permission to choose. And even if it creates so much crap, to not make me wrong. And of course, I made myself wrong. But it was a commitment that I will move in the direction of allowing myself to choose and not making myself wrong, no matter what the outcome.
So that space, that free falling, like you're in the middle, is that, and I'd love to hear from both of you, is that what it felt like stepping out from the cult world that you both felt that you were in? Like, did it have that, like, where do I land? There's nothing underneath me, like fear of losing everyone. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, for me, that happens stepping out of the cult of Christianity, which I think is an inflammatory conversation in and of itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. I talked about this on the Guilty of Heresy conversation that we're going to upload to our podcast. So you can go there, thecultconversations.com. But the very first, this was in my 30s, even pre-access consciousness, when my reality started splitting open. I was like, oh, I don't think what I've been believing is what's true. I remember feeling panic and kind of terrified, because once you start to be willing to even entertain that something else might be possible or true, it does crack apart the foundation off of which you've built your life so far. It does. And for me, it was like, I'm going to lose this circle of people that I've come to really value, and they're going to have opinions about it, and I'm going to be labeled as this. And there was a lot of known ramifications to it and a lot of unknown random. I'm like, okay, and now what? Like, what is this? What does this mean about, what do I believe now? Do I need to find a place to stand, sit? Like, this was pre-access consciousness where I was like, I'm letting go of the one thing that has gotten me here, contributed so much to getting me here, has been the thing I've defined myself by. I was it can be a lot.
Wow.
Like a wrecking ball is how
Yeah.
I would describe it. Like your whole foundation, your whole structure, your whole way of navigating the world is just like a wrecking ball coming in and just knocking it to smithereens. And I think the added delight of Christianity is, if you're wrong, it's hell. So you really don't want to get this wrong. I mean, this one fucking matters. We've got to get this one right. So what if I'm wrong was a big, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? And I think that's a real energy with people in actual cults, people who do cult with things that aren't cults, organizations you're in, whatever. What if I'm wrong? So what if you're not? No matter what. And I love what Christel said, the gift of cult, because even if you hear a conversation and go, I actually am part of something that is an actual cult, you're still not wrong. What has it contributed to your life? What nurturing thing drew you in? And one of the things I really do not like about cult conversations is there's this idea of, well, how could those people have fallen for that? Those people found something that matched something they knew. It might not be 100% accurate, but it was the closest thing they could find to something they knew, and it contributed something. And if we could acknowledge the gift of it and not judge the rest of it, then we can go free.
Yeah, like I think you guys have probably watched the documentary The Vow on the NXIVM, participants. And it was so crazy because when I first watched that documentary in the first episode, I'm like, oh, this sounds a lot like Access. And it was really light. They really do a good job in the storytelling because they talk about what drew everyone in, which was this lightness and joy, and they were getting more of them. That was all true. And then other stuff got revealed, right? Like the controls and the beliefs, and you have to be part, and then you got deeper into the rabbit hole. But so the further I went in, the more I was like, this is where the truth with the lies attached starts coming in. And this is where it seemed as if they hadn't been empowered to know. They'd been empowered to use this and follow this. And if they didn't follow it, then they were out. And so that's where it becomes cult. That's where it's like, but there was something there. There was, and they got a lot out of it. They got a lot of themselves out of it. And I would say, and this is the gift of cult from my point of view, the awareness that they got after, is also really valuable. And I don't know how many of those members are seeing that as a gift, but I hope so. I hope so for them. I was born into a cult, and one of the massive gifts I see about that was I always knew I was different. I was told I was different. I always knew I was different. I never expected anybody else to agree with my point of view. And I bring that strength with me to today, where I can have these conversations where I already know people aren't going to agree with me, and I'm good with it. I don't, but I got that really from when I was born. You were different. Nobody's going to think like you. Just know that you're different. Other massive gifts is my ability and awareness with the spirit world. Other massive gifts are I could recognize the parts that were really light to me. I really remember that. And the parts that were I'm just not going to pay attention to that. So I have a real ease with throwing away what just doesn't work for me. So I think all of us, if we would be able to stop judging ourselves for a moment, could look at what we chose and find the real gems in it. My point of view is that we are always leading ourselves forward. We are always learning, and we're exposing ourselves to things that we need, energies we need, strengths we need, abilities we need. Just aren't always super conscious about that. So what would it take to really look back and identify the gifts?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Christel mentioned earlier that we met in Bible school 20 years ago. And when I look at everything that led up to that choice to be there, and then everything that's led up to where I am now, I would love to say that I could have just made this leap, but I know that's not true. And each choice that I made was like a stepping stone that contributed to me being able to keep moving forward into something more.
Yeah, that
as long as we don't make it wrong again. Yeah. The judgment of it stops us from receiving the gift of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that choice for Bible school for me was that was a game-changing choice for me. That was one of the things where I learned that I could choose big things. that I could change my own life, that I could change my stars. Going through that school empowered me in a way that got me to marriage, which then got me through that, got me to that. Like every single thing that I chose, I needed. Like, so I wonder what it would take for us to be kinder to ourselves and really acknowledge the brilliance that got us here and start strengthening our ability for awareness so that we can have more access to us.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. I feel like there's a little bit more if you ladies are willing.
Bring it.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about the difference of like a cult or people treating something like a cult. So it's following. It's you have to do it a certain way kind of thing. So someone, let's say they're really good at this, at following the next thing, right? And now we talked about some tools of like how to start to get like, what do I know about this, and start to like undo some of that programming, essentially, right? I would love to kind of, it's almost like I want to pull the veil off a little bit on the following piece. Like,
yeah, okay.
I think sometimes people are following and they don't even know that they're following. So
Totally.
yeah. So and maybe it's a personal story for each of you. How does that, when you look at that and when you did follow, and then when you started to follow your own knowing and your own awareness, like, can you describe a little bit about how that showed up? And then how did you move through? Because I know for some people, when they're like the veil's coming up, and you guys talked about it, it's like, oh my God, this might not actually be true for me. They feel like they're going insane or they're scared. So,
yeah,
through that. Yeah.
Marnie, do you have something right off the top?
Well, I'm going to go to what you said, Christel. The gift of the cult for you was knowing that you were different. And so a key switch for me was getting that. I tried so hard to be normal while not being normal, while really working my ass off to be normal. And because I wasn't, because I looked out in the world and I didn't see anybody that matched me and what I knew, and I wasn't willing to accept my different, I had to find something I could subscribe to that was close, because then I would feel close enough. I would feel not too strange and weird, not too different, and be able to function. So a key piece for me was to go, I am different. And what if that is not a wrongness? What if it's actually a gift? And if I stopped trying to be normal and allowed myself to embrace my different, what would that shift and change for me? And what shifted was I no longer needed to find a match for Marnie somewhere out in the world, so she had a place to belong. I could be at home with me.
Yeah. And I think if you don't know if you're following, there's signs and symptoms of being a follower. One, you feel insecure a lot. You're like kind of always looking around you for like what the other people are thinking or doing. Two, you're easily rattled. So your need of a reactive reality is very strong, meaning like you're easily rattled. Like when things go on, you're like, whoa. Someone who is not following has a really strong space of being, right? Like they're just clear. There's ease, there's glory, like all the ease, joy, and glory stuff we talk about in Access is actually true. That is something you are as a being. But if you're following everyone, and you can be following like everyone else's reality, right? Like it doesn't have to be just one. It can be just like, whoever's got a reality, I'm there. I'm like, so you're always feeling tossed around in the ocean of points of view because you haven't yet chosen to be, not stand as you. And I saw this most recently, and there's so many different examples of this. I saw it most recently in my relationship. I've seen it in other ways, in my 10 years with Access Consciousness, where I didn't realize I was following. And then all of a sudden I was devastated by what someone chose. And I had to really look at, wow, I made everything they were the gold standard. I have given away me in favor of what they were. And when they didn't work out, I'm like, oh my God, who am I? So, and in the relationship, like I had made his reality the space we were living from, but I didn't know I was doing it. So it's very common for that to be unconscious. But you can look at the symptoms in your life. If, for example, money's not working in your life, whose reality are you following? Trying to make it work for you. Have you discovered your reality with money yet? So I think the symptoms of following are many. And that could be a whole conversation, right?
I just got, sorry. Well, this is really quick. I just got now, because there's a tool in Access. We talk about like, what is your reality with this? What is your reality with this? And I'm also a facilitator, and I've had people that have so much difficulty with that. And I'm like, how do they not know what their reality is? And I just got it from you, Christel. It's like, because they're literally so used to, so entrained to following other people's realities that they've never actually even looked at that.
Who teaches you to ask that? And on top of that, we come in to the world, and if you look at there's all these studies done on the brain and the brain development, like kids up till 2 years old, you don't have a separation between your reality and other people's reality. The soup you birthed into is yours.
Yeah.
So you don't even start individuating or attempting to create anything with yourself until you're like 2, 3. And then by then you're resisting, and like, that's the fight phase, that lasts until you're 50. But like, there's no separation. And in truth, as a being, if you look at that we are energetic beings, there's no separation with energy either. So when you grow up not with no education on awareness, and you have a reality, and let's teach you and show you and facilitate you to discover yours, and nobody did that, we were taught geometry instead. But so when you grow up like that and you're not educated, and it perpetuates, then it's no wonder we get to this age and we're just simply looking for the thing to give us that validation that we aren't as wrong as we're pretty sure we are. And then we give ourselves away for it. So I think the following conversation is a really good one. We could probably riff on that for a while. You just want to look at, are you giving yourself away left, right, and center? And what if you started to ask yourself, if I were including me here, what would I choose? What's my reality with this that I haven't discovered yet? And let the universe start to contribute a different awareness, start working a different muscle. And that's what really changes everything.
Oh no, Marnie, we can't hear you.
She's muted.
No.
Oh, you're.
What happened? We killed the AirPods, maybe.
Yeah.
No. Can you go to the little microphone and see if you can switch the
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, I think we're pretty much at the end anyways, unless okay. Okay, I want to thank you ladies so much for, and maybe it doesn't feel like a courageous move for you, but I think it's a pretty courageous move to be like out there having this conversation and being willing to facilitate people in this arena, in this realm. And I'm so grateful for the possibility you literally have brought into the world. It's very, very exciting. I wanted to end with like this one kind of question. So maybe, I don't know how Marnie's going to answer, but maybe it's just a head nod. But I just kind of wanted to bust this last fucking lie that I feel. And I want to ask you, like, since you started to follow you, do you feel more alone or less alone?
That's a great question. And definitely it's like alone isn't even on the board anymore. So it's not even this or that. It's just other. Wow. The thing about when you start to follow you is you tap into the richness of oneness. And that can sound so fucking esoteric. But what I mean is like, we are literally a part of and surrounded by the molecules of consciousness, the beings of consciousness. Like, not only are we not alone, but we are a rich element in this inclusive world. And it can seem like a non-reality when you are hitting this conversation for the first time and your life's just been about surviving. This seems like, who cares? I remember when I found Access, I was hearing all these conversations about the earth and the communion with the earth. And I'm like, can we not talk about that? I literally just want to be happy and have good relationships. I don't fucking care. But, 10 years in, the conversation changes so much. So you are a part of and one with everything that is. And that is it's a really different, rich experience. And
Marnie says what Christel said. Beautifully.
And on top of all that, you change your playmates and everything. So anyway, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I know that this is just the beginning and people can go to your podcast. We're going to have a link to that. And they're launching soon, just so you know, you don't have to wait too long because I'm excited for more. And the classes, is it 2.5 day or?
No, we're going to be doing some tasters, which are going to be free, in the intro class, a couple hours, and then a 1-day class.
Okay.
Or a teleclass. Let's see. Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. Okay. And so keep your eye out for that. And then we'll put links just to your individual if people just want to follow, because you guys do so much more. Like this is one of the many amazing things that you ladies gift to the world. So thank you both so much again. And
thank you, Cassie.
And thank you, listeners. We'll see you next time on the next show. Bye.
Bye for now.
And I lost my little place to stop the recording. There we go. Thank you for exploring the curious universe with me. Your curiosity matters. And what if together we could create a greater, more curious world?